from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university. We ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. Competitors, you may begin when you are ready.
The commodities market, a place of extreme volatility and sensitivity that affects every Canadian consumer, business owner, or consultant differently. Hello, Kevin, and welcome. Today, my team, Cassidy, Adit, and myself, Brad, have a plan for you to expand in a way that we feel will help you prosper the most in such sensitive and volatile conditions. The way our presentation will look to you today is I will go through an agenda, an executive summary, and identify the problems. Then I'll hand it off to Adit. We'll go through an in-depth analysis, and Cassidy with our firm recommendation and implementation, which we feel will have a unique and impactful long-term benefit to your business. So let's begin. The strategy we've outlined for you today is to provide quality manufactured equipment in Canada with unbeatable customer service. And we believe that that strategy all encompasses the three things that we believe are key in this industry. So, our executive summary. The primary issue we identified for you is how to profitably expand Fort Garamount in Western Canada. So, a couple of alternatives that were identified. We want to either acquire an existing rental chain in Fort McMurray, which we'll see buying one of three alternatives. We want to build something from the ground up for you to operate out of in a similar fashion to the rentals, or exit the Fort McMurray market and look for something new, which we believe will have a better net present value for you as the CEO. So, our recommendation for you today is actually to exit the Fort McMurray market, given the sensitivity and volatility that we're seeing with no definite returns in the future. And our recommendation is going to be to expand into British Columbia, and it's going to be a different business model for you today. So, with that said, some of the issues that we identified. Let's start with expanding with Komatsu. So we understand Komatsu is a very good parent company for you, and they supply all the things that you need to have a great revenue stream in the current model. However, this issue is going to not be, substantial in terms of the declining oil prices and the sensitivity, so we're going to address that later on. Secondly, some of the issues are you need to make a purchase to have a better foothold in the Fort McMurray market, because as you can see, there's a decline and we need to see higher synergies through an acquisition or building a new location. So thirdly, you're going to have to pay a premium on the purchase. Because of the market conditions declining, it's surprising enough the people that are in this market have a firm place to stay. So therefore there is a large premium that will have to be paid, and is this justifiable is the question. Moving forward, you're going to have to build your own branded rental shops, because what it comes down to is there's large players in this market and you need to be competitive in the marketing sector. So finally, exit Fort McMurray is very risky, but we do think that that recommendation is going to find you the highest value today. So moving forward into a bit of analysis so you can have a little bit of background information into why this is our recommendation.
Thank you, Brad. Now, Kevin, we've spent countless hours analyzing all the documents you have provided us, and we've analyzed with an aim to establish all the key connections so as to come to a recommendation that not only allows you to prosper in the long run, but to truly innovate in your industry. Now, like Brad mentioned, you have a very strong relationship with Komatsu, and their intention of moving westward is something that we have taken into strong consideration, and that we would want to adhere to later down the road in our recommendation. Now, moving forward, let's analyze the Fort McMurray market. Currently, the market captivation is around 3.5 million, which is the average. The market is pretty huge, but there's 80 players in it. So in terms of Komatsu's interest in Western Canada, staying in Fort McMurray not only allows you to adhere to Komatsu's interest to move westward, but also allows you to expand and increase more market share in Western Canada. Now, some of the cons in the Fort McMurray market currently is the oil prices are at a six-year low currently. What does that entail? That entails that the consumers, the willingness to spend is relatively less currently. There are uncertain market conditions, so the business environment for you is more or less risky currently, and due to declining demand in your industry, we do see that the Fort McMurray market does not provide you enough benefits. Moving on to the next point, analyzing the valuation of acquisition. Now we see that there are 3 sets of chains you can acquire: Transverse, Caledon, and Vanguard. Now currently none of them are willing to sell their companies or their chains, so they are expecting a premium, and they have indicated a 6 to 7 times valuation of their pre-tax earnings. So you can see that for Transverse, their cost for one location is approximately $6.3 million. For Caledon, it's approximately $5.9 million, and for Vanguard, it's approximately $5.6 million. Now, you can also see that we have an extra valuation of BC expansion. Now, the BC expansion we have modeled strictly with aligned with Vanguard, just because Vanguard is heavily into the forestry industry, and BC is very heavy on the forestry industry as well. And that's where we will be heading later down the road. Now, transverse rentals. Looking a bit more closely into transverse rentals, 40% of their revenue is generated from equipment rentals. So what does that mean for you? It means that acquiring them, whatever benefits they have right now, acquiring them would, in terms of your business, would only allow you to gain 40% of the advantages. The rest are tool rentals and platform rentals, not exactly what you are looking for. They have 15 locations currently, whereas you have 2 in Fort McMurray. So that does pose a lot of management commitments. We have done a cash flow analysis, and we see that the net present value of 4 years of operations is approximately $5.75 million of negative cash flow. With Caledon, we see that going back to the previous slide quickly, the $5.75 million of negative cash flow does entail the acquisition. No, never mind. My bad. Going forward, Caledon. Caledon has a broad selection of rental equipment, so it does allow you to diversify into your market, to really expand your customer base. However, they do have 20 locations, so from 2 to 20, with lacking management in Alberta, you would need to seriously consider how you're going to manage this whole new section of Western Canadian businesses. With Caledon as well, we see a net present value of cash flows for 4 years of approximately $7.33 million of negative cash flow sadly. With Vanguard Equipment primarily services the forestry industry, and they have 15 locations, and they are involved in equipment and tool rentals. Now, all of these are not only in line with your business, but also in line with Komatsu's business and Komatsu's products that they sell, that you guys distribute to. With Vanguard, however, we see that there's a net negative cash flow of $5.75 million in 4 years. Now, exiting the forestry market, British Columbia market. Now, since Komatsu has shown the intention of moving into Western Canada, we see a better option in the British Columbia market, primarily because British Columbia is the most growing the most in terms of economies amongst all the provinces in Canada currently. British Columbia is huge in the forestry industry, which, like I said, is in line with not only you but Komatsu's businesses. Also, British Columbia, moving to British Columbia does adhere to Komatsu's intentions of moving into Western Canada as well. With this expansion, we estimate that you'd see positive positive cash flow of around $500,000. Now, you do have another option. You do have another option of building your own store. building your own store does allow you to have autonomy and control, and like Brad was saying earlier, to really build your brand and to truly control how you want to be perceived in Western Canada as a company. However, there is a heavy financial investment into building your own store that extends over 10 years. And even at the end of 10 years, you're still looking at a constant investment in operations of around $10 million. We do see, since we have seen previously, operating in Fort McMurray will cause you to have negative cash flows just from operations. So building your own store not only would lead to negative cash flows, but of a greater extent, just because you would have to constantly invest into the store and the various equipment maintenance. Now, to go into the recommendation, I'll pass it off to Cassidy, and she'll walk you through our awesome recommendation.
Thank you, Adit. That was a wonderful introduction. So we see here we got a recommendation. As Adit mentioned, the options that you had provided us, we looked into thoroughly through net present value and all the qualitative factors in Fort McMurray and the situation that's going on there currently in the oil industry. We've decided that those are not valuable options for your company in order to sustain your growth, especially that you've been seeing in Ontario and Quebec. This cannot be sustained in Fort Mac and would just end up draining your funds out of your profitable Ontario and Quebec stores. So we're saying that you should maintain the Fort McMurray stores that you currently have. You don't need to expand anymore. Those ones are doing well and are keeping your foothold there, but not making you lose money because you've already got there. And Komatsu has shown strong interest in remaining there, because when their other dealer went out of business, they actually convinced you to buy those stores, showing that they have a heavy interest in Fort Mac. We don't believe purchasing more stores will actually lead to further profits. And then we want you to expand into British Columbia. As Adit mentioned, it's a very profitable area. Even though the economy's not doing fantastic right now, it's still growing strong, and there's no issues as there is with the oil industry. And then utilize Komatsu's loan in order to buy the locations in British Columbia. We believe they will be very open to this because it is opening in the West. And once you can prove to them that the Fort McMurray is not the best option to open more stores, we believe they will go for the loan for British Columbia. So what would that implementation look like here? So in the short term here is just August. It's prior to your senior meeting with the partners there. We believe you should meet with forestry consultants. Our knowledge in there isn't as heavy as theirs would be, and they would be able to provide you with more information, specifically what types of Komatsu products would be best to service out there, because they do have quite a large range of forestry ones. Which area is best? Probably more northern BC, but again, they would have more information there. And to really find out how you can enter smoothly and transition smoothly over there. Next, we know you just came back from a meeting with Komatsu, but we believe you need to talk to them again and bring this information to them about Fort McMurray and how it is not the most profitable location to grow into, just to maintain the foothold, and discuss with them and negotiate a separate contract for BC. Because we believe there is a strong reason why you should go in there, and we believe that you can prove it to them and get that loan and convince them to move west as they've shown strong inclination. Next, at the end of this 3-week mark, you have to present this idea to your senior management and convince them and win them over into the forestry market. Because we know this is not the idea that you were thinking you would be leaving here with today. So we'll be willing to talk with you and bring it up with you so that we can discuss it, and you'll have all the information that you do need to bring this up with the senior partners. Next is a medium term. This is more of from those 3 weeks to 1 year from now. So we recommend that you inquire into British Columbia stores. As we've seen before with the Fort McMurray, it is quite expensive to build up your own stores and to start from scratch. Therefore, buying one that's already in that industry will be a better starting place for you, like you did in Fort Mac way back in 2002. Now, we believe you should seek legal and valuation professionals, both to acquire these companies and make sure that they're valued properly and you can spend the proper amount and you won't be spending extra money, as in Fort Mac when they're valued quite high. We want to make sure you're getting the best amount of money and also the best advice from these professionals here in order to go forward and succeed. We suggest you also buy 2 locations. It's a good start. As you've proven with Fort Mac, it's a good start, even though you shouldn't grow there. It is a way to get your foot in the door and really start there, but not start with too many locations, because you have that problem with management and growing. You don't want to grow too big, especially with how decentralized your locations are. Next, we want you to hire management employees. So this is very important. We believe you should hire 2 management and 2 employees, and start on a very rigorous training process. So we believe it should be a minimum of 2 weeks for the employees, preferably longer, and at least a month for the management to really sell them on the goals of the head organization in Ontario and Quebec, and really put them on par with what you're doing. And then also send a few of your management out to these new British Columbia stores to start out with. And following that point, you'll be able to let them lead more independent businesses so that it's not taking away from your management in Quebec and Ontario. So they'll be more independent there and can grow and make decisions based on the industry that's there and not having to seek the centralized advice from Quebec and Ontario, which don't have as much insight into the BC industry. But however, we do believe there should still be monthly reports as well as checkups from management staffs, specifically you, Mr. Sparks, to go in once or twice a year and really check out what they're doing and make sure it's on par with your beliefs of how you wish to run your company. Now the long term, so that would be September 2016 onwards, so 1 year from now onwards. You need to evaluate how these British Columbia stores are doing, maybe hire a few more staff or bring in some more product lines depending on what the situation is. And then look to open more stores in British Columbia, because 2 is a good start to get yourself all set up, but you don't want to stop at 2, especially if they're doing quite well. You want to open 3, 4, 5. We're thinking up to 10 in the next about 5 years, and then also look elsewhere in Canada, because now you've established yourself across Canada, though they are a bit dispersed. You want to see if there's more areas in BC you can open, like lower in the mainland for some of the products that Komatsu offers, or if there's certain places in Alberta that aren't oil related that can benefit from the products as well, or even into Saskatchewan with the agriculture. You're really able to do that more because you've started opening your door to these new opportunities. Now I will let Brad take you through the risks and mitigation. Thank you.
Thanks, Cass. So a little preface before I get into these risks and mitigations. We focused heavily on some of the qualitative factors in this industry on the basis that we had a positive net present value, which was a 4-year evaluation, because a 4-year evaluation used all the information that we found relevant that was provided and based on our own estimates. So just a little bit of a preface. So the first risk I have for you today is that Komatsu wishes to expand into Fort McMurray. So this could be a potential expansion for them, and you might think that you're losing out on an opportunity because you're not the company that does it with them. But obviously, this isn't looking positive from the calculations that we've done, and a little bit of a mitigation is once you establish yourself in British Columbia, you do sell these Fort McMurray stores to have an increase in capital. So that's kind of gonna mitigate the fact that they're going to expand into this region. You're going to lose that foothold, but like I said, this will be contingent to success in BC, which we believe is fully reasonable. So a second risk is the management in British Columbia. So a couple of those key success factors that I highlighted at the beginning were having high quality manufacturing goods and customer service. And we realize there's currently an issue with centralization in your organization, and that this might be a risk moving further over into Western Canada. So what we think is a great mitigation for this is you going out there and doing biannual trips to visit this new management team and establish them. And if you could realize, the short term is 3 weeks, so this is all the pre-work doing to find the right people to be in the right place to make this happen. But we think you going out there and doing annual trips will really reduce the fact that because it's decentralized, you're going to have a lower quality of customer service. So moving into a summary of our presentation for you today, the primary issue we identified is the fact that we need to find a profitable expansion into Western Canada, and we couldn't find that in Fort McMurray. So some of the alternatives were to A, go in Fort McMurray with a rental chain, or build your own in Fort McMurray, or exit Fort McMurray completely. So our recommendation, like I said, exit the Fort McMurray market currently and expand into this profitable forestry industry in British Columbia using some of the synergies that you have with the knowledge in your current industry. Now with that, I'd like to open the floor for questions.
That concludes the presentation portion. We will now begin the answering question period.
I have a question. Are you satisfied that Komatsu will stick with you, us, as a company, if you move to a totally different marketplace when they were specifically asking about addressing the Fort Mac and Alberta marketplace?
That's a great question. Basically, the intention for Komatsu was to shift and make a stronghold in Western Canada, not specifically Fort McMurray. And we do see that you, Kevin, and Komatsu have a very strong relationship because of the long business history, the various line of credits they offer, and the various financing they did to establish various aspects of your business in Quebec and Ontario. So we in a way, we are satisfied in terms of the expansion moving to British Columbia instead of Fort McMurray. A, because British Columbia has a more favorable economy, more growing economy. B, the products are like for Komatsu sells the same kind of products, although slightly different industry, which actually benefits you even more because you get to diversify a little further into the forestry equipment industry. So overall, yes, we are pretty satisfied with the expansion into British Columbia.
I have a question just on the numbers. So you had the same cost per store, you used Vanguard's model for BC, and yet our NPVs were so different. So are you expecting a really high revenue or lower costs when we go to BC?
Yeah, absolutely. So
why, I guess?
yeah, of course. So there's a lot of assumptions made in formulating the fact that we based it off the Fort McMurray office. So the first one was that they have 15 stores currently in the forestry industry. So we thought it was closest to compare to. Then there's the question of there's a difference in the value of the dollar in Fort Mac and British Columbia. And because of all the competitors there right now, it's the increase in actual dollar value is decreased by the fact that you have to be so competitive. So moving into BC, we saw that the revenue streams were going to be higher because based on the falling housing market, which you plan to go into Fort Mac, you're going to have a negative net income in Fort McMurray. So the revenue, not necessarily higher, but it's going to be more stable.
If I could add to that a little bit more. Also, we based it off your current financials of your two stores in Fort McMurray, and we estimated the net income to be 70% of those two stores. And the basis for that assumption is, since we are recommending you start with just 2 stores in British Columbia, so we thought it would be a fairly valid assumption to make that you would hit 70% of your current net income that you're already generating in a worse economy in Fort McMurray than in British Columbia. Thank you.
Just want to clarify, I thought I had seen earlier that you were maintaining Fort Mac, but I seen the final recommendation we're exiting. Can you just clarify whether we're retaining the 2 stores in Alberta or exiting? And if fully exiting, have you thought about the implications of losing the preferred supplier status with Komatsu potentially?
So that was a bit of an error on our part in the PowerPoints. You did not see that wrong. We are intending to maintain those stores just to keep that foothold, and then if Komatsu does choose to go with another supplier because they really want to expand, then we will have to sell those stores because we don't want to be in direct competition with our own supplier and our other competitor there. But we're going to try and sell them on the fact that we can maintain that foothold if the situation in Fort Mac does improve. But we want to sell them really on the fact that they should go to BC with you.
There's time for one more question.
No, I'll have one here. And I think the same thing, just the fear of losing Komatsu. So they are going to probably find somebody to expand with them into Alberta. So do you have any sense as to how we're going to convince them to go with us with BC as well as them doing Alberta with someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. And our basis for this logic is that 11.9% of their total revenue is based in industrial industries, which we see is going to be growing. So because of this decline in oil, we see that offering them a potential to increase this industrial revenue of 11.9%, possibly up to 13, 15, 20%, being a key player in that move is really going to give us power with Komatsu as a supplier.